We'd like to thank Mainspring Companies for sponsoring Season 1 of The Next Entrepreneur. Mainspring celebrates the entrepreneurial journey, and we are very grateful for their support. Okay, wait, let me back up a second. So you bought this building, and your college-age kids lived in the upstairs of it, and the bottom floor wasn't being used, so you turned it into a little music venue?
Exactly.
Welcome to another episode of the Next Entrepreneur Podcast. I am your host, Andrew McClendon. I'm here with my producer, Daniel Sagona, and our guest today is Chris Maxwell. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Really glad you're here. So Chris is the executive director of the Louisiana Americana and Folk Society. Did I say that right?
You sure did.
And but your operating entity, which many listeners will recognize, is the Red Dragon Listening Room. Right?
Yes, we've been doing that for 18 years now.
So Red Dragon is a nonprofit, right? And tell us what Red Dragon Listening Room is for our listeners that might not be familiar.
Well, listening rooms in general are they're just not really commercial venues. In this case, people expect you to be a bar. They expect you to be I don't know what they expect you to be, but the Red Dragon has operated for 18 years just as a listening room, a place where people could go and listen to the music that they love so much. And the dynamics are a lot different than a bar.
Yeah.
You aren't dealing with, three drunks at the end of the bar and people making noise throughout. We're actually a place where the audience is pretty much silent during the performance. They'll be boisterous between songs and, during the breaks and the like, but everybody is respectful during the songs.
So your establishment is really unique and such a cool place. It's iconic in so many ways. But can you describe the inside of your bar? Your listening room, I should say.
Well, it's odd. It's filled with couches. Everybody thinks that's the oddest thing in the world, but there was actually a practical reason for it. When we first started using the building that we're currently in, there was a lot of echo. It's a concrete building, and everybody thinks to put up egg crates and different things to absorb the sound. We just put a few couches out there, and they serve the purpose.
And you've got a few in there.
18 to be precise.
18 couches, not counting all the other upholstered chairs.
Yeah, we've even got leather theater chairs that date back to the 1940s. They came from a theater in Foley, Alabama, and we found them at an antique store.
Okay, so how many do you seat?
We can seat 100. We've actually our world record is 124 for Joan Baez.
For Joan Baez.
Yeah, I hope the fire marshal isn't listening. I'm kidding. We actually are rated for more than that. They rate you on square footage.
Yeah. So really cool place. So, but look, right now, the world's a little crazy for everyone. And our local municipality has shut down restaurants and bars and theaters and music venues like yourself. And
gatherings of more than 10 people. And that, you sure hope that includes every show we've ever done.
Yeah. So, and I've seen recently, so you've canceled your shows for March and for April.
Yes, we have. No choice in the matter. I wish we weren't put in this position, but it's you get lemons, you make lemonade. We'll just work for the future and come back strong.
So I was wondering if you could walk us through what the last 48 to 72 hours have been for you since you got the news of this shutdown, and how you've handle that, because you've got a lot of things to coordinate there, right? I mean, you've got artists, you've got fans and people who attend your shows, and walk us through what that's been.
Well, it all started when when it looked like the virus was going to reach Louisiana and get around a bit, and And I started getting contacted by patrons saying, "Are you going to stay open? What are you going to do?" And it's very fluid at the moment. We actually got in our Palooza last weekend as our final shows before shutting down, and they were so poorly attended. We had maybe 40% of a normal crowd, because everybody was already fearful that,
Right.
and the reason we decided to go ahead and continue with it at the time, and I believe still now, Baton Rouge still does not have a confirmed case of the virus,
Right.
but we know it's coming, and with it coming, we just had to get proactive and get out in front of it. I think the city's doing a good job so far. They're closing down a lot of things. It's really going to hurt some restaurants in particular, and all kinds of things in the service industry are just, hotels are taking a beating. Of course, the all of the different airplanes, you name it, everybody's going to be taking a beating in this.
Yeah, it's a hard break on the economy, and I guess the only saving grace for restaurants is they're able to do to-go orders. But they may keep the kitchen staff busy, but it's going to be very, very painful. But for you, then you had to, as far as the Red Dragon goes, you then have to reach back out to the artists and start cancellations. And what was going on with that?
Actually, it worked in reverse. We waited, and the artists started contacting us and saying, what would happen would be they'd get a couple of cancellations on a tour. And most people don't realize that when an artist goes out on tour, it all fits together like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle. They need to have, say, 12 days in a row, and the way they make their money is by having everything stacked one after another.
Right.
And if they have off nights in between, it usually doesn't work out for them financially. Well, all of these people were losing gigs. They'd have one or two cancel out on them, and it was no longer economically feasible, so they'd have to cancel the entire tour. This has already happened to us on a couple of sold-out shows. They had to cancel a couple of shows prior to us, and then we were swept away with and it was going to happen anyway.
Yeah.
It was just a matter of time.
Well, look, before we get into the rest of your story and your social entrepreneurial journey with this Red Dragon Listening Room project, I wanted to try to just tap into like what this experience means for you personally, what it means for the Red Dragon, with all these businesses, having to put on the brakes, there's going to be a lot of collateral damage. And so can you, as far as the entrepreneurs, the budding entrepreneurs that may listen to this podcast, and, there's a lesson to be learned in what's going on today for you and your nonprofit. Can you give us some preliminary thoughts on how you see this impacting you, the Red Dragon, and what you may be doing to mitigate it and to be,
We're one of the really fortunate ones. We're fairly well financed, and we will survive this. This will be a hiccup, and it'll be a speed bump in the road, but we'll simply have a few down months, and nobody can say when this is going to end at this point. But right. I would say we're looking at losing 2 or 3 months at the very least, maybe 4 months of all of our shows. And at that point, we'll need to relaunch again, which relaunching is not going to be a difficult thing. People are dying to get out for entertainment, and that's only going to keep, they're certainly not going to be shying away from it once they can finally get back out of the house. So,
right.
But other places will have to recreate, or they'll lose their leases. We're not in that circumstance. We own the building. As far as employees go, everybody's a volunteer. Myself, my wife, her best friend, Christy. It's a very small operation. We've got 6 or 7 volunteers, and that is all we ever have. So there's really not the problems that a lot of the commercial businesses have.
No, the artists themselves.
That's what's breaking my heart. The artists are going to get killed in all of this. There is no form of income for them. In fact, we when canceling the shows, we give people a group of 5 options. And one of the options is, instead of refunding their ticket price, that we will send their ticket price to directly to that artist. And a couple of people have taken up on that in these early days, and I hope a lot more do, because these artists are really hurting.
Yeah, that's nice for you to offer, that to the patrons as an option. So that's cool. So why don't we? Well, I appreciate you sharing that, because I know it's tough times, and appreciate your insight on that.
Well, there's good times and there's bad times in business, and that's really what this is a show about entrepreneurs, and I spent my entire life working for myself before I retired, and so this is my retirement job, so to speak, and if it all went perfectly, you wouldn't need people to go out there and risk their fortunes and become entrepreneurs. These are the people that are willing to do that.
That's right. That's for sure. So help us understand then how you got to first starting the Red Dragon, and that was like 17 or 18 years ago, right?
Yeah, it was.
And you were still working.
Yeah.
Right?
I actually have always done 2 or 3 jobs. When you're an insomniac, you do multiple things, and that's been my whole life. So we started back in the mid '90s. We started a small record label, and our small record label was a not-for-profit label. That's not-for-profits generally stay that way, but some eventually turn into true nonprofits. That's where you have federal standing, an IRS letter that determines that you are a nonprofit organization.
A 501c3, right?
Exactly, and that's we are.
So when you started that, the record label, that's a side gig. You have a day job?
Right. I started the record label while owning, I used to run a series of video stores in Baton Rouge called Showbiz Video.
Oh, yeah.
And they were all around the city, and it was a wonderful thing. But we saw the writing on the wall when technology was starting to take over that, and we sold that business in 1998. So 22 years ago, we sold that, and it lingered for a number of years after that. But we saw that was coming.
Yeah, I kind of think of 99 as a huge downturn for that business. So right around there.
I'd say our timing was pretty good.
So you went from the Showbiz Video business.
Yeah, while we were doing that, we started the record label, and we ran it out of Showbiz Video, just the back offices. And we ended up, over the course of 14 years, recorded 53 albums and had a great time with it. And we ran it until, I guess we started in 95 and ran it until 2009, and had a great time doing it. Now, you'll note that overlaps with the time we started doing the Red Dragon. We got to the point, we bought an old building, and we got to the point where our sons living in the upstairs while they went to university was only using half the building. So we started bringing the musicians that we knew from the record business to do small house concerts in the downstairs. And people would say, well, where are you doing this at? Oh, at this old building. It used to be a tattoo parlor. There's a big red dragon painted on it.
Okay, wait, let me back up a second. So you bought this building, and your college-age kids lived in the upstairs of it, and the bottom floor wasn't being used, so you turned it into a little music venue?
Exactly. And
so, yeah.
And we could do shows for about 50 or 60 people. It was a really small downstairs, and eventually we knocked out a wall and did a few other things, and grew a little because people really enjoyed it. We would do one show a month in the early years.
Okay, so the studying wasn't terribly interrupted then.
No, my sons loved having we actually had a pool table downstairs that for shows we would put up on its side and roll into the next room.
That's crazy.
And then roll it back out. And we did that until the thing literally disintegrated.
So that was the first Red Dragon.
Modest beginnings.
Yeah. And then you mentioned the building that you're located in now, right?
Yeah, well, this was at we were on Government Street for our first 5 years, and the building was seized through eminent domain. They wanted to put in a turning lane. about 10 years later, they decided, wow, what a terrible idea. Let's get rid of that turning lane. So, but in the meantime, they took our building and knocked it to the ground.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So you found this other building and where you are today.
Exactly. Ours is an old, used to be an old bar. In fact, it was an old punk bar. It was, they used to have, the Red Hot Chili Peppers played there back in the mid-'80s, 1984, 2 years before they had a record deal. They also had Henry Rollins, the band X, all kinds of these folks that if you are at all a punk rocker, or if you just grew up in that era, which I did, I got to see a few of those guys in the back when I was a late teenager.
Yeah, well, let's pause there for a second because you obviously had this huge interest in music. I mean, you went from mentioning the video store to opening a record label, right?
Yeah.
And then, of course, the Red Dragon. So explain to us how in-depth your music interest was as a young person and how that got you to where you are today.
Well, I had a great love for music, but absolutely no ability to play it. And if you enjoy music that much, you're going to find a way to do something to be involved with it. And my wife and I used to go out and catch these wonderful music shows in Baton Rouge. And Baton Rouge had a vibrant music scene for a while, and it's come and gone over the years. It's back really big right now and doing well. But we were out one night, and we were out car shopping during the day, and then we went out to a music show that evening. And I turned to my wife and I said, would you mind if I didn't buy myself a new car, if I just started myself a small record label with that money? I said, I think my line to her was something, the world can live with one less Lexus. What do you think about doing this? And I think she thought I was nuts, but I have a great wife and she humors me on such things. And so we started the small record label and did that for 14 years. We traveled with it. We would go all around the country and just all kinds of fun stuff.
Yeah. And so, starting a record label, now what does that really mean? I mean, if you have a record label, does that mean that you have a recording studio?
Well, it doesn't mean you have one, but we did. We actually had one of the artists on our label. I helped him build a recording studio down in the 9th Ward in New Orleans. It was a beautiful little studio. It was in his house. He had a double shotgun house, lived in one side and recorded in the other.
Oh, wow.
It was a wonderful setup, and that lasted all the way until Katrina. And Katrina was kind of the kiss of death for all that we were doing. We recorded everything down there, and after the storm, the artist that was living there, his name was Mike West, he and his family moved off to where'd they go? Iowa.
So you cut those 50 plus albums out of that studio?
We cut most of them there. We also did a few we did a lot of albums in Oklahoma. We started there was a scene called the Red Dirt Music Scene, and it was very in its infancy. There were a couple of albums out by a few people, and that was about it. And we went and did 15 of the first Red Dirt albums, which if you've heard of any of the Red Dirt artists now, there's a whole bunch of them, and they all grew out of what we did. So we were kind of, really? I'd love to say we were trailblazers. Unfortunately, most trailblazers don't make any money. We weren't trying to, but we didn't have a lot of success. It's looked upon fondly by the folks that are in that business now. But
so I did want to ask you about the economics of the record label. Was that a profitable venture?
No, it was never really meant to be a profitable venture. There's an old joke about how do you make $1 million in the record business? You start with 2. Eventually you'll spend your way down to $1 million. So
it was a labor of love.
It was, and we really enjoyed doing it and dealing with the musicians and the like. But it was just call it an expensive hobby. I had to explain it to one of the tax assessors one time, and they didn't understand why, And I said, well, consider it a hobby. And, I used as an analogy all these people that that spend a fortune on their hunting equipment. And I said, well, this is our hobby. And she said, oh, I get it. Her husband was a hunter.
Yeah. Okay. So, in the record label business, are you doing the mixing of the music? Are y'all doing the engineering?
I would hire engineers.
Okay.
My function was hiring the engineers, finding the musicians, putting everybody in the correct room together. Sometimes a good producer and the like, and getting the records made. Then I would take it or take the recordings, have them pressed, hire the folks that would promote them. We would service the radio stations. I mean, there was a lot of work involved in it. The stuff that's not very glorious. And
Right. So, of the 50 plus albums, were any of them moneymakers?
Oh yeah. A couple of them did quite well, and as a whole, we were a not-for-profit, so everything was loosely run. We would have albums that made money,
Right.
and they would fund the ones that lost money.
Right.
We had a fellow named Mike West, and we made 14 albums for him. When I tell people that we sold 58,000 records of his, they say, "Oh, that's not possible in folk music." I said, "Yeah, well, we did 14," and they do the math and figure out that yes, that was indeed possible.
Okay, well, let's take a break right there and get in a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. Gear Train is a national testing, inspection, and audit company that works in the e-commerce fulfillment industry. So these guys provide the quarterly and annual inspections, preventive maintenance inspections, and they do testing and audits of conveyor systems and automated equipment in big distribution facilities. They support the entrepreneur's journey, and we're proud to have them as a sponsor. You can find Gear Train online at geartrainperforms.com. Okay, and we are back with Chris Maxwell, the executive director for the Red Dragon Listening Room. And so we left it off. You're now getting in your new building, right?
We got in the new building. It was an old bar, and we there was no way to get the 70s bar feel out of it, so we just embraced that. And went out and found a bunch of old signs and made it look like a real 70s bar.
Yeah. And what year was that?
What year was that? That's 2007.
So you've been in there 13
years.
Yeah,
13 years.
And so when you were doing about a show a month, you mentioned in your previous building, did that pace continue in the new building, or did you need to up it initially?
We upped it a great deal. We actually had a 3.5-year streak of selling out every show for 3.5 years when we were doing one a month. That was very easy if you're only doing one a month.
Right.
Now that we do about 60, 65 shows a year, it's a lot harder to sell them out. People are not going to come to every show, where right. If you did one a month, they'd come to each and every one of them.
Yeah, so you're doing 5 to 7 shows a month now.
Yeah.
But it seems like recently you've been on a real tear. But there may be a reason. You've gotten a lot of great media coverage, right?
Yeah, we've been so lucky. It's great. I guess the most recent one was probably the one that took us over the top again. Every once in a while, we just have something that really helps us out.
Right.
And this one came from the mildest or the oddest of sources. I had a phone call one day, and a lady said, "Hi, I'm with Newsweek magazine, and you're mentioned in an article that we have upcoming. One of our writers had been in your venue. Would you send us a couple of photographs?" So I called our photographer, and she mailed him over 3 photographs, and I completely forgot about the whole conversation. That was the end of it. About 2 months later, my phone just started blowing up. And when I say blowing up, I mean unbelievably. There one call after another, and this went on for days because the Newsweek article came out, and it wasn't just a mention. It was the article was titled "The 10 Music Meccas of the World," and it had 10 places in the world that you had to go to for, one would be, I don't know, South Africa, so, all these different countries.
Right.
And only one of them was in the United States. And the one in the United States was number one of the 10, and that was us.
Oh, my goodness.
And it was so odd that it happened like that. Well, within 48 hours, we had 300 booking requests, 200 of them from overseas. I guess Newsweek is really big in Europe. And I couldn't even keep up with the phone calls. I used to pride myself on returning every phone call and every booking request. There was just no chance.
Right, no way.
And it has continued since then. We're still getting about 150 a month, but we used to get about 70 to 80 a month. So it's doubled our number of requests now.
Wow, that's amazing. So that was in February of this year.
Well, the original article came out in November, and it's carried through till now.
Oh, wow.
I mean, it's still going 3.5 months later, and surprising us every time. People drop me a note, read about you Newsweek.
Yeah. I mean, I can't even fathom the thought of you when you started Red Dragon, thinking that you would be listed on the top 10 music meccas in the world.
Yeah, it's pretty stunning. We about 3 years back, we got a mention in the New York Times, and it was, even that was wonderful. I mean, it was like a one-line mention, things to do in Louisiana if you're on vacation there, and it named 10 things to do. Go see the Chauvin Sculpture Garden, go do this, go do that, and the Red Dragon Listening Room. And we started getting customers from that. Hi, we're coming in from South Carolina. Do you have any shows this week? It's just a completely shocking thing when people start to travel to come to your little venue.
Yeah, that's amazing. So the way you work is the artists show up, you do a deal with them. Like what are the different type deals that you would do with a client? Like you have to sign a contract, like I'm only going to show up for X number of dollars, right?
Exactly.
Whether you sell out or not.
Yeah, there's a couple of different contracts. One, the lower level artists who don't have a lot of clout will play for the door, meaning whatever comes in the door, whatever they get, that's what they get for the evening. And if it's a good night, they make great money. If it's a bad night, they don't make much. And but as an artist climbs the ladder a little bit, they demand a thing called a guarantee. And the guarantee is, this is the very least I will come and work for. Even though I'm getting all of the money, I have a bare minimum of, say, $1,000. If it's a $1,000 guarantee, I am on the hook no matter what. If the door brought in $700, I'm still paying them $1,000.
Right.
And virtually all of the acts we deal with now are at that level. So probably 75-80% of the people, or maybe more than that, have a guarantee.
All have a guarantee.
Yeah. And then the last one is a set price artist. It's a guarantee is a floor. But a set price artist is somebody who will play for X number of dollars, and they may say, I need a $5,000 guarantee. Well, when we get into these really higher numbers on guarantees, we simply make it a set price show. And if we can come in ahead on it, great, it'll cover that show that just lost $300 last week.
Right.
But we have a few people that fall into that range, and that's very seldom because we try not to get that many expensive shows all in one after another. It wears people out. A show that expensive would necessitate a $50 to $100 ticket, and we can't do that back to back with our customers.
Right. So people are buying tickets online. Right.
They do. We have it set up with a ticketing service. In our case, it's called Brown Paper Tickets, and they charge everybody online. We keep counts on all of the shows, and we know when it's coming up on selling out. We started this years ago. It was a yellow pad of paper, and when I got to the end of the piece of paper, that's how many people would fit in the room. And so we've actually embraced technology for a technophobe like me.
So you've seen the number of requests for artists who want to play in your venue go up since, your big media hits. And how have you seen, your attendance at your events?
Oh, we're up considerably over the last. I guess I had to measure things. We're a nonprofit. We had a wonderful grant last year that helped us with some advertising that we do. So we had to track exactly where we were, and this is one of those rare occasions where I don't just pull the numbers right out of my backside. I actually know precisely where we came in, and last year we grew at 19% in audience. That's a spectacular number. If you grow at 2 points in a year, you've done okay. If you grow at 4 points, you're doing really well. And we grew at 19 last year.
So, I mean, when you look back at the Newsweek article, the New York Times article, I mean, that's priceless stuff.
Yeah, that and a couple of the artists that played with us. We will forever live off of the fact that we hosted Joan Baez for a show. We're a small place. At the time we had her, she told me that she hadn't played a place this small since 1958.
How did you do that?
It was just a fluke of luck. We had a series of shows. We had Guy Clark came and played with us, and he sent us various people, but one of them was Rodney Crowell. Rodney Crowell loved it, so he sent us his ex-wife, Roseanne Cash. Roseanne Cash's show was attended by the producer for Joan Baez, and we had charged $100 a head for it, and she made all the money. And he said, "Would you like to do the same thing for Joan Baez?" And I thought he was kidding, and he said, "No, I'm not kidding. She comes to Baton Rouge all the time and sleeps on my couch." And sure enough, he got Joan Baez for us. And by the way, that the couch she used to sleep on, she donated it to the Red Dragon. That's in our green room.
Yeah, are you serious?
We'd call it. I actually put little signs on it at one point and put them online. It said, "Joan Baez slept here," and then next to it was another sign that said, "She did. She really did." And apparently, she was quite amused at that. We sent her a picture of it.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. So,
sweetest lady in the world, too.
Oh, my goodness.
She hugged every person that wanted to hug her at the end of the night. We did 2 shows, and so the evening ends. She's driving off with her the people that are with her, and they pull right back into the parking lot. I thought somebody had forgotten to go to the bathroom or something. She comes running in, straight past me to my daughter. She had forgot to hug my daughter goodbye.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. When I tell you that lady is all that, she is all that.
God, that's phenomenal.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. So you've had some memorable times at the Red Dragon. I mean, from big names to characters, huh?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, we once had an artist bring his opening act with him. They were best friends, and at the end of the night, they got into I can't even call it a squabble. I got to call it a fist fight. I mean, it was almost like a slap fight. These were the 2 least likely people to ever see fighting with each other, but one did something the other didn't like, and it took us 20 minutes to calm them down enough to get them in their car and get them the hell out of our parking lot, and they made it 1 mile down the road where they started to fight again in their car in front of the Greyhound bus station in the middle of the night. So that was, that and all of the stories that we had an artist, famous songwriter named J.D. Souther. And J.D. Souther, he's world famous. He wrote 5 of the Eagles' big hits, 3 of their number ones.
Really? Just
all of these great songs. And I was such a fan. I stress was. And he came in, and you need a 3-hour program for me to tell you all of the horror stories that surrounded him, and I only knew the man for 2 hours.
Oh my God!
Yeah, there's nothing good that happened at
that show. He was
show.
Just offending your patrons.
Oh my goodness, he had one woman in tears. I mean, I had 2 separate people come up after the show. One owns a big car dealership in town here, and I'm not going to say Ralph Sellers, but hey, Ralph. Yeah, and Ralph said, "Chris, can I punch him in the face?" I loved that. I thought that was a great line until about 5 minutes later, a local doctor came up to me and said the exact same words. He said, "Chris, I really want to punch that guy in the head." Wow, I had the calmest people you would ever meet close to violence by this one jerk of an artist.
Oh my goodness. So, and his story is going to be included in your book you're writing. Tell us about that.
I'm writing a book called Dragon Tales, Red Dragon, Dragon Tales. I thought that was probably the best part of the book is the name. But I actually had a subtitle that my wife won't let me use. The subtitle I was hoping to use was going to be JD's an Asshole and 38 Happy Stories. Well, my attorney said, "Chris, change that to I think JD's an asshole." I said, no, I think I could prove it in a court of law.
That's great. So this is a project you're working on now?
Yeah, I've fleshed out 38 stories at this point, or 39 stories, and it's probably going to expand to 40 or 50 because they're short stories. I mean, some of these things will fit on a page or two, and others. The J.D. Souther's getting a whole chapter, and Joan Baez is getting a whole chapter. We've had some of these artists are just there were just so many stories that surrounded them.
So Jerry Jeff Walker has played.
Jerry Jeff Walker, what a pleasure. When he first showed up, he's just such a curmudgeon. You couldn't get him. Jerry Jeff, would you like anything to eat? No, leave me alone. I don't want nothing. And by the time he left, we were having gumbo that evening, and he smelled it. A few minutes later, he comes over. He says, "Yeah, can you get me a couple of bowls of that gumbo after all?" "Oh, sure." 5 minutes later, "Can you get me a couple more?" By the end of it, we thought he was going to be coming back every year for life. He just had such a good time. His wife had such a good time. And it never repeated. We were never able to get him back again.
Yeah.
But
that's great.
We'd love to.
So Reckless Kelly's come through recently?
Yeah, we just had them. They've played the regular Red Dragon a couple of times, and then they just played a theater show with us. We also do a series over at the Manship Theater here in town. It's the big theater. It's the really nice place. And
yeah, that's nice.
And so we moved them from selling out our little place over to the big theater, and they sold that out too.
Okay, so tell us how that works. You have the Red Dragon, but then you also do bookings for artists, and they perform in this Manship Theater. How many does that seat?
It seats 323.
323.
And I'll tell you how that came about, and it's interesting from the business point of view. When I left my regular day job, I had to keep health insurance, but as the executive director of the organization, I could not sit on the board of directors if I was being paid or getting having my health insurance paid by the nonprofit. I did not know that was the case, but the accountants told me you'll have to make other arrangements. So we set up our series at the Manship Theater as a for-profit series, and that series pays my health insurance.
I see. And so is that an instance in which you're renting the theater?
We are. We rent the theater staff, you name it. It's an expensive venture, but it's a step up. I mean, it's a $6 million theater, and it's a fantastic building.
It's beautiful.
And everything is great there. And I can't say enough about them. I actually go out on stage before each of the shows and do a short commercial for them. They're also a nonprofit. So it's kind of a neat circumstance. We're able to couple up forces with them, and they get a different crowd than we do. So it's a way of appealing to more people.
And so, is that a similar instance in which those would be for your bigger artists? It would be a set price, if I'm understanding your formula right.
Yeah, they also have a term called a back end on a deal, and if it's a large theater like that, they'll always have an additional financial goal. If they sell the place out, they may make hit a goal and make a couple $1,000s more for the evening, and it gets a little more complicated with the big theater shows.
Yeah, but you're on the line for renting the facility which is a sizable number, and then you've got the artists, and you've got to sell enough tickets to get them paid off as well as the theater. And
Yeah,
so
we've had some shows there that have been unsuccessful. When in our first, we've done that now for 7 years, and in our first year of it, we thought that we could combine two kind of slightly smaller artists and get a bigger crowd. Well, unfortunately, the two smaller artists had about the same exact demographic, and we once had a show with only 83 paying customers in the big theater. It was an embarrassing lesson that I had to learn.
so how many shows would you say you've done there?
I guess we've done 62 now, and we've got
Wow.
yeah, we've got 5 more planned for this, or 6 more planned for this year. Starting back in July, we're very fortunate. We didn't have any of them planned in spring, early, and into summer. We take June off for our annual vacation, so we didn't have any planned during the period that we know we're going to be down for the coronavirus problem. So I guess small blessings along the way.
Interesting. Okay, well, let's take a break right there, Chris, for a message from our sponsor, and we'll be right back. MBD Maintenance is a proud sponsor for the Next Entrepreneur podcast, and we greatly appreciate their support. MBD Maintenance is a commercial building and maintenance contractor. They will build your commercial building, maintain it. They do additions, remodeling, tenant improvements. If you need MBD maintenance for your commercial building needs, you can find them online at mbdmaintenance.com. Okay, and we are back with Chris Maxwell, Executive Director with the Red Dragon Listening Room. And Chris, we didn't really touch on this earlier, but you did mention folk music, right? And that's really the genre that you focus on. But these are all original songwriters, right?
Yeah, we deal almost exclusively with songwriters. That's kind of our passion. And folk music is a pretty broad term. A lot of these people have hits in the country music realm, and even in the pop realm, some of them have had to hit records. But usually the people we're bringing in are the writers, the people that have created that art. It's a passion for original music. You can go anywhere and hear Brown Eyed Girl played in in a bar on 3rd Street or something like this, but we'd rather have somebody play us what they wrote.
And that's been your passion from day one.
We've always been enjoyed what the people create. It's nothing against cover bands, but there are a lot of places in town that cover bands can play, and there just weren't any places in Baton Rouge. When we started this, we had 12 years where we were among the only places that would even allow original music. And now there was a great proliferation about 5 or 6 years ago, and most of those have fallen by the wayside since then. There are still a few that are operating. So it's a lot more, if there are 4 now and there was 1 back then, hey, it's fourfold over where it was. It's grown a lot.
Yeah.
So
well, I can imagine, I can see where, coming from the record label background where you're recording artists and it's all original music, right? No one's recording, cover songs.
It's expensive to record cover songs.
Yeah. So it's all new music. And so I can see where that would lead right into your that being the format for the Red Dragon. So, but you also try to work in local artists as well, right?
Our format has been the same since we started 18 years ago. We pick up a touring band or touring artist as the headliner, and then we have a Louisiana act open the show. Call them a local opener. I hate the term local only because it's kind of demeaning. It makes people think that, this artist isn't that great. He's just the opener. Some of our openers have Grammys or Grammy nominations. Wow. Some of them have gone on to great success. We've got a pair out there right now, Clay Parker and Jody James, who have become a regional act, and they started kind of opening shows for us years ago, and they've now Rolling Stone has named them one of the 10 country acts that you want to discover.
Wow.
Yeah,
and so I've been in the Red Dragon before, and you're passing the hat.
That's for the openers. All our contracts are with the headline bands, and the openers we'll pass a bucket around at the just a song or two before the end of their performance, and it's wonderful because they're actually getting really good pay for you'll do a 30-minute set and maybe have $200 or $300 in the bucket when it comes back around. That's not bad for a 30-minute set of your original songs that you wanted to play for the audience.
Right.
And it's also a nice way of still being able to give all of the money at the door to the headline act.
The other thing that I've seen you do, which is really cool, is you will pass a hat for like the Baton Rouge Food Bank.
That's our chosen charity. We're in South Louisiana. It's very polarized politically in the climate that we're in, and even charities are polarized. But do you know anybody who doesn't want to feed hungry people? That's the charity that everybody will get behind, or at least it has been for us. And so we've been with the Greater Baton Rouge Food Bank 3 or 4 years now. We've been doing this where we collect food, of course, and we also have done. This year we did 3. Well, in the last 6 months we did 3 pass the hats for the food bank and raised them. The last check I sent them was last week for $1,150, and the previous one was, I think, $1,600 or $1,700. Right. So it's the food bank. We all think of bring a can and we'll give it to the food bank, and that is wonderful, and that's helps out a ton. But they also need some cash to run that place, and if all the small businesses would do the same thing, just pick a charity, pick one that's close to your heart. All of Baton Rouge would just blossom with charitable contributions.
No doubt, we subscribe to that mentality for sure. So it's really intriguing. You're running this nonprofit, right? But which is a complete labor of love, right? I mean,
definitely, it can be very expensive sometimes.
Yeah, it's so impressive with what you're doing. Not just the fact that you're working so hard, you and your family and your volunteers, to bring this, original music to Baton Rouge and some great artists and a great venue that you've, curated. And it's super cool, just so cool. But on top of that, the hard work that's involved in it, but you're then going on the next step and you're helping raise money for the food bank, which is you've done some really meaningful progress there. So congrats on that.
Oh, thanks. I think that all companies need to be corporate citizens as well in a market, and it. From a selfish point of view, it actually pays dividends. People see that you're doing these kind of things, and they want to frequent your venue and your business. So it's just from that standpoint, you still profit from it, and you profit in your soul as well.
Yeah, it's good stuff, Chris. You're doing a great job. The other thing I've seen you do really well is your social media footprint out there. I mean,
I have so many people who either love or hate our social media, but I said, as long as you notice it,
exactly.
Who was the old guy who said, I don't care what you say about me, just spell my name correctly?
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is, as long as you noticed it.
Right.
It's like those old Price LeBlanc commercials they used to run. Everybody hated them, but everybody remembered them.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, but I mean, there's so much content that goes out there, and there's so much involved in getting your message out about shows and schedules and updates, and there's a lot of moving parts. And I was just thinking earlier that because of social media, you're able to do that affordably. I mean, you've got a huge investment of your time to do that, but otherwise you get the message out, without cost. And for a nonprofit, that's a big deal when you have to communicate as frequently as you do.
Yeah, when I retired from the real world, the one thing I did have was a little more time on my hands. So I spend about 3 hours a day, maybe a little more. My wife has referred to my time at the computer as she refers to my laptop as my mistress. She said, "Are you finished with your mistress? Well, let's have supper."
Well, look, Chris, you have done just a phenomenal job for with the Red Dragon and for the city of Baton Rouge and all those that frequent from across the country. You've had people visit from around the world.
Oh, it's been wonderful. And we're 18 years old now. Maybe we can do it for 18 more.
Yeah, well, look, it's really, there's a lot of people that I talk to about your business, and they're genuinely grateful for what you've created there. And, the fact that you do it as a nonprofit, and you put so much energy into it. And I'm just really grateful for what you've created for the city there. And I think it's contagious, and I wish the best for you in the future. And thank you for everything you've done.
Well, thanks so much for having me. And everybody out there listening, support the artists. They need it.
So as you can tell, Chris Maxwell is a free spirit. He is passionate about live music. He's passionate about original songwriting and local artists. And he has done a great service to Baton Rouge to bring this talent to his club. It is a labor of love and an absolute passion project for him. And we're grateful for what he does because it's a big win for the city. Chris can be found at rdlrbr@gmail.com. That's as in Red Dragon Listing Room, Baton Rouge @gmail.com. And he can be found on Facebook at Red Dragon Listing Room. The Next Entrepreneur can be found on iHeartRadio, Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast platform. You can also follow us on our YouTube channel and on Facebook. You can reach Propel Productions at propelyourstory.com. Our producer today is Daniel Segona.